Welcome to the Cool Tools Show. I'm Mark Frauenfelder, Editor-in-Chief of Cool Tools, a website of tool recommendations written by our readers. You can find us at cool-tools.org. I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin Kelly, founder of Cool Tools. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, it's great to be here.
In each episode of the Cool Tools Show, Kevin and I talk to a guest about some of his or her favorite uncommon and uncommonly good tools they think others should know about. Our guest this week is Randy Regier. Randy is an artist living and working in Kansas City, Kansas. Randy's lived on both coasts over his life, but has settled in the middle because it's a good place to live on the least amount of money in order to make the most amount of things. I love that kind of optimization. And Randy, I am so glad to have you on the show. I've been a huge fan of your work and art for a really long time now. And so it's great to have you on the show.
I am so delighted that you are able to join us and to share with us some surprising things, which we don't know about, I'm sure. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you both and all. It's just a real honor. And Mark, it's a pleasure to and an honor to be asked to do this as well, because I've been a real beneficiary of your generosity in exposing my work to others. So I appreciate it greatly.
Oh, good. Yeah, the kind of stuff you do is perfect. Like that fake store, the New Penny's Last Stand, which was a store you set up somewhere in the Midwest. It was just this beautiful, looked like a kind of a 1930s Art Deco architecture. And you couldn't go in the store. You could just peer through the window. No one's allowed in, and you just saw your work in there. That was just amazing.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So Randy, tell us about some of your tools. So the first one are 3 books. We'll share the photos. They're well-worn, well-read paperbacks that have really great kind of mid-century design going on them. Tell us about the books.
Yeah. So the books, one could be under the impression, looking at them, that the reason I have them is for the covers. which would be reason enough, actually. I didn't actually buy them for those covers. I bought them for the titles, and I've read them, and a couple of them I've read 2 or 3 times. But it's like they say, you can't step into the same river twice. One of the things that's sort of profound about those 3 books is that each time, every 2 or 3 years that I return to them, I'm not the exact same person, and I have a different experience reading them. I see things in there that maybe I missed or wasn't ready to read the first time. So you've got the Johann Huizing, the Homo Ludens, the book about play and culture. And one of the things that, in my experience and from my point of view in making, is play. We don't speak about play as much as I wish we did, or it's devalued. Play is considered something that's done when we're not being serious about our lives, and I find play to be a reason for living. Without play, I don't know why I would want to be. Why I would even want to be here. I mean, I take play very seriously, and at the same time, it's fragile, and it can be very brief, and it's beautiful. And that book is just a really elegant look into what the real value of play is, in animals and humans and what have you. And and
when was the book written? Just so I have, it looks like it was ancient, written maybe centuries ago.
Yeah.
Is it sort of up? Does it feel current?
All these books are modernist, right? They're ancient by contemporary standards, in the sense that a lot of people feel we've moved beyond these writers. I wouldn't agree with that. 1950 was the first.
Okay.
The first issue. So. But yeah, there's just some really beautiful lines in it, but mostly it just talks about play in such a way that it lifts it from just the one-dimensional or two-dimensional way that the word tends to get used in our culture, and elaborates or elucidates the real critical value of it. And since so much of my work appears to be toys, or are toys, depending on how you look at my work, it's hard for me it's pretty much impossible for me to go through a career of making things about toys and not having to deal with the word play. And so to be able to make it more dimensional and squeezing his writing has really helped with that.
Okay.
Another book, The Future is History by Robert Heilbroner. That's, I think, 1960. So it's much newer.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're getting
very contemporary.
We're really getting into contemporary stuff now.
Yeah.
1959. And that book is profound, I'm holding it. So this book is profound in that I would urge people to read it now that are having difficulty with the current times, which may be a majority of persons, thinking that this is all rather new series of events. This the degradation of the American dream, a lot of it having to do with finally really looking at what the American dream is or is not. But Heilbroner in about 1959 or 60, he saw very clearly where this was all headed, and he talks. One of the most profound things in this book was he talks about the American experience as sort of based on this notion of eternal optimism, which no other nation in the world was part of their DNA.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and the art of and he talked about that this probably couldn't last, and when at some point Americans would have to face the reality that optimism doesn't always get you there. And the book is wildly, in my reading of it recently, it's wildly relevant in this moment, wildly relevant and prescient. And I don't know much about Heilbroner, so I'm not qualified to speak about the author in terms of like a scholar might. But that book is just really, frankly, it's comforting because it takes some of the shock and the sting out of the present, and if you could sort of, maybe it dilutes it or gives longer legs to this dark passage that we're sort of navigating together.
Well, that's interesting. And Kevin kind of has that view of like long-term optimism, in that it's easy to get pessimistic in the short term, but over the long term, history has shown that things really are getting better for
I call it protopia, meaning that there's only this 1% betterment that you can't see unless you look in retrospect.
Yeah. I think you might find that Heilbroner book relevant to that, and it's I need to find that somewhere because it's really hard to come by. And I'm not the eternal optimist, but I need to behave in an optimistic way in order to be of any use to my kids and my family and my colleagues. If I choose the dystopian path, it's the easier way to go, but I'm just not of much use to the culture that way. And I do like to feel useful. I don't need to feel important, but I like to feel useful, which is good.
That's well put.
Good thing. But I like to feel useful.
Right.
And if I can generate some sort of sense that, in 50 years, things will be 0.1% improved, I'll take that. I mean,
exactly.
I'll take it.
That's all we need, because it can be compounded, and know, if you have a 1% compounded, you can become quite successful. So
like Office Space or whatever.
So tell us about your second tool.
Okay, and then and then there was A Shape of Time by Kubler, but that's all in there. People can look that up. Right. What was the second tool? Was it that Makita drill?
The driver. I think it was a driver.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty, nothing exotic about that tool, but I was thinking pragmatically too, because I prefer to talk about books and theories.
You'd rather be useful, right?
right. Like, what do they need from me? I don't have that. Oh shoot, I'll pretend I don't have Google Chrome. No, it was that tool. I have a lot of hand tools. A lot of that has to do with coming out of industry and being back in industry because of COVID and stuff, and needing them to survive. But some tools, the more you use them, the more you realize that they just enable you to just be so wildly productive when you have the good fortune to be in a really productive groove and things are going and you've got more ideas. Like I get in a situation where I have these ideas that I can't wait to make manifest, and and there's X amount of hours in a day. And tools are those the right tools are the things that enable me to be to realize my best intentions, and that is a large words to, or it's sort of a profound statement to try to apply to a Makita drill driver. But I use that thing for so many different processes, and it's so whoever made it was so it's just so perfectly. What's the old phrase? The hammer forms the hand. I think it is where the right tool can lead you to be more competent by drawing you into it's a really quality tool can improve you as a human and your capacities. And I really feel that way about that drill. It fits my hand beautifully. It's got that wonderfully thoughtful LED light, which I'm still geeking out on, and I've had that for 10 years. I can't believe it. I've got it. I live in the time in human history where you have an electric drill without a cord on it and a light built in. This kind of a.
And are you speaking? Are you singing the praises to cordless drills in general, or specifically to the Makita 18 volt, and compared to maybe say the DeWalt or something else? I'm just trying to get a sense.
Yeah, a bit. I mean, I'm not Makita doesn't. I'm not on their roster,
right,
but so to speak. But yeah, we have some DeWalts at work, and they're like sledgehammers compared to the Makita. The Makita is more like it's light and it's elegant and it's quick in comparison. And the DeWalt tools, I feel like, are made more for contractors. They really get used hard. I mean, you see DeWalt tools, there's big men using them hard, and I guess they're made that way. And I don't know, Makita's, for me, this particular model is like it's just a perfect fit for who I am and what I want from it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and it could be any brand. It's not that it's a Makita. It's just that that's who happened to make that one. So.
And it might be helpful to hear a little bit about the kinds of things that you make or do with the tools, because your art is not necessarily pastels on paper. It's something else, right?
Right. I'm not sure what it is either, but. They're phantoms, they're fictions, but
they're physical. They're three-dimensional.
Three-dimensional, and so a lot of what I do is analogous, or is hand in hand with the trade that I was raised in, which is auto body and auto body collision repair, restoration, customization. So a lot of these toys that I make use very, very similar processes and materials. So the Makita, I may be drilling holes with it in 1 minute, and a minute later I may be flipping open the chuck and putting a polishing pad in it and using it for a buffer with a small foam pad, and then I might turn around and use it for a lathe. Right? I might spool up, clamp it into a vise, and put a rod in it, and put a small wheel or a disc in it, and use it actually as a little benchtop lathe. So I think a couple times I've used it as a flashlight. but I've already spoken about my love for the light in that thing. But yeah, and then when it comes down to it, and you're hanging as an artist, you're hanging a show. It's just the most basic thing in the world at that point. It's you put a Phillips bit in it, and you hang your show, or work on the house with it, work on the car with it. You put a socket attachment. I use it as a wrench. There's just anything that you need to turn or spin within a certain scale. It's just marvelous. I can't believe I'm sitting here talking about that Makita drill. Is sort of weird. I must like it more than I even thought. Shoot. Simple minds are easy to please. So, I think.
So, in your workshop of other physical things, you have a third suggestion for a third recommendation, which I think maybe is not so much a specific one as maybe a general category. You're talking about what's inside your 5-gallon bucket.
Oh yeah. So it occurred to me that after I sent that image that painted on the outside of that bucket is modified into a very inside joke that I'll just deal with this now so if you don't have to ask. But the reason it says let's poo this instead of let's do this is that's an inside joke from the first time I did Art Miami. The one time I did Art Miami, the sort of peak of the career thought I was supposed to have where you do the big art things. And I ended up driving from Wichita to Miami to do New Penny, that toy store. And it was just by far the apex of my career at the time. And due to a series of sort of unfortunate events, by the time I got to Miami with all my artwork in tow, I ended up not having a hotel room, having driven 22 hours straight down the length of Florida or something like that out of Alabama, and ended up parked outside of a park in Miami with all my stuff at 4:00 in the morning. And all of a sudden I had to, let's just say I had a bodily process that immediately had to be attended to. And I had to dump my bucket of tie downs out and use that to take a dump at 4 a.m. in downtown Miami. And I thought, so this is what arrival looks like.
Well, this is what art looks like.
Yeah. When you get really big, you're pooping in a van in Miami.
Yeah, right. This is success.
With Kansas plates and wondering, why the hell did I believe what they told me in graduate school? And so that bucket, a few friends that know me well, and now you, no, that's what that's all about. That was sort of a nod to that. Back to the point of the contents of the bucket.
But you're filling it with new things now.
Well,
right?
yeah. I don't use it. We have a toilet in the house, so that's bonus points for that. And there's always Starbucks on the road. But the tie downs, the bungee cords, the tie downs, the zip ties, those things are absolutely invaluable because a lot of what I use a lot of found objects, a predominance of found objects in my work. I mean, my toys are not made out of toy parts. They're made out of found objects or the guts of found objects. And,
can you give me an example? I'm such as what?
Yeah. Okay. So, like when we lived in Wichita, and that was a pretty good picking ground. It's a city that's had a lot of aircraft industry over the years. Still has a lot of cottage industries, and you drive by these old businesses, and they'd be, timed out. So this stuff would be shoved out in the back or out to the street. Big old. I built a piece out of a 1949 Kelvinator refrigerator. So a 1949 Kelvinator refrigerator was built by the Nash Automobile Company. And so it's got all these automotive motifs and everything in the stamped steel. It's a piece I built Celestial Mechanic out of, which is at the Ulrich Museum. I can send you links to that. Any rate, so here's this refrigerator that has got this fantastic amount of parts and potential, right? All these stamped steel and these chrome medallions and the structures. Well, if you're going to drag that thing home, you've got to tie it down, depending on what you have to drive. I mean, that's a pretty big object. But there's other things that I will see or people will give me things. For God's sake, people give me too much stuff, but their intentions are good. But sometimes they get these things, they're just awkward, and they're too big for the vehicle. Like we drive this little old Mazda car. I don't even have a van these days. And so I try to jam these things into the trunk of this car, and then the tie downs make it possible for me to get that whole thing home with the least amount of humiliation. And, does that make any sense?
Yeah, exactly.
The kinds of materials I used can be really odd shapes or elaborate things, and maybe I just want some pieces from them. But the honorable thing is to take the whole thing from the person who's trying to get rid of it, take it apart later, use what I can use, and then recycle what's left. But the first thing that has to happen is I have to get it home.
Right.
And that's how
I've noticed that people have stopped learning to tie knots because they use these straps and tie downs, which are actually probably even better than knots. But that's where knots have gone, is they've been replaced by straps and ratchets and things like that.
Mhm.
I'm embarrassed to say, but I'm of the school, and a friend put this on me, and he was right. He goes, "Well, if you can't tie a knot, tie a lot,"
That's good.
and that's what my knots look like. Like, bless his heart. Those are all going to have to come
Excellent.
loose. He'll probably make it, but I like that. Can't tie a knot, tie a lot. And
Very good.
we're at that point in history.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, no, it's you've got tie downs, you've got ratchets, you've got these straps.
I mean, that stuff is just. I mean, I've used it for other stuff. I mean, it's just an incredibly economical, effective way to have a stuff that has my back when I see a thing that I wish to have, to make something from it. Because when I'm on task, when I've got a vision for a piece to make, these things just appear. I mean, it's kind of like when you think you buy a rather unique car, maybe as an example, and then all of a sudden you start seeing them all over, because all of a sudden your eye is redirected towards the thing, that certain thing, and so you start seeing that thing. And with my practice, since when I make things, they're not made from raw materials; they're made largely from found objects. Then I start to see them. And when I see them, to consummate that, to create that piece, to achieve at it, then there's the point of acquisition. And since the stuff I use is usually timed out or discarded or whatever, generally speaking, I can get my hands on it. But again, if I can't get it to the studio, it's of no use.
So I'm interested in where you find the found objects. Do you if you have a vision and you're needing to begin to make this thing, do you begin to kind of drive aimlessly through neighborhoods or the industrial areas primed to see, or do you start going through Craigslist looking for free stuff, or do you just sort of open your arms to the universe and say, I don't know how it's going to come, you're going to arrive somewhere or other?
33% of all those, and then 1% magic. And you want to hear the 1% magic story?
Okay.
I mean, I'll try to make it quick. But Vicki and I were living in Portland, Maine, which was a foreign country to me because we came out of Kansas. And the Midwest still has a lot of space, right? People have space out here. And so there are places in Kansas I could go back in the early 2000s where World War II guys who are World War II veterans had like 40 acres of scrap metal, right? Most of those people are gone now, but as little as 5 years ago, I knew places I could go in Kansas where I could spend a day walking acreage looking at piles of parts, things to make things from. Those places are now gone to me because those people have passed away. But when we were in Portland, Maine, I set out to do my thesis work about a woman who tried to build a pre-World War II racing car because the war industry had given her the sense that she was created equal the whole thing built around this idea that women in war are given an equality that then's taken away again. So I'm trying to build this vintage pre-war hand-built racing car while we're living in Portland, Maine, where that stuff is just not available. And I'm racking my brains about how to find it. So I did use some Craigslist, and I just tried everything possible. Well, Vicki and I are driving to work one morning. I'm taking her to work, and we're in heavy traffic. And this pickup pulls in front of us with this octogenarian couple in it, new Chevy pickup. And in the back of that pickup is a World War II era P-51 Mustang drop belly fuel tank. It's literally the torpedo-shaped fuel tanks they put into the wings of World War II air fighter craft in the back of a brand new Chevy pickup. And I go, holy shit, because they use those for body work for the early land speed record cars in the California, the SoCal Racer and stuff, and the Bonneville Salt Flats cars. After World War II, guys were using those fuel tanks to build the first streamlined race cars. So I see this thing in there. This is completely magical moment. And Vicki goes, oh, shit, I'm going to be late for work. And I'm like, please. And she said, yeah, you have to do this. Anyway, I follow these people. They're pulling into the scrap metal yard to have the thing, to throw the thing into the crush pile. And I run up and bang on the door, and the guy goes, well, yeah, you can have it. We're just cleaning out our property for our daughter's wedding. And they had a place up by Standish Lake, and they go, why don't you come up and go through the rest of our stuff? So I got that fuel tank, And then that afternoon, I went out there and they had old car frames out in their woods and more fuel tanks. You just can't. I'd say you can't make that shit up. But that's the 1%, and then the other 3 are also true.
Yeah, that's really fantastic.
But I still can't. I can't explain how that to me is borders on spiritual. That moment, there's just really no explanation. The odds of me landing behind them in traffic 2 minutes before they pulled into the scrapyard for a thing that can't be bought for love nor money, that I specifically needed. I don't know what to tell you, Kevin, about that one. It sounds far-fetched, but I have a witness. So.
Well, have you ever heard of the term pronoia?
No. Tell me.
Well, you know what paranoia is, right?
Sure,
it's where you believe the universe is conspiring against you.
Right.
Well, pronoia is where you believe the universe is conspiring to help you.
Well,
so that was a moment of pronoia.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, that's beautiful. I had not heard that before. Yeah. It absolutely felt that way, and I mean, that was 2007.
Yeah.
And I still think about that, like, my God, what are the odds? And
no, that was a pronoic moment, and the universe really is conspiring to try and make you succeed.
That's lovely. Yeah.
So tell us about your fourth tool. I hate to kind of maybe move it to the mundane, but
no, nothing. Yeah, they're not actually mundane. So those books, those 3-ring binders. I'm a big fan of books on paper, and I still consume. I mean, I consume a lot of imagery when I do a lot of research. Research is really the thing one of the things that attracts me most to being an active artist, where I get attention. In a sense, by that I mean that I get enough attention for what I make that encourages me to make more of it. Is that I love researching. It's a form of archaeology, I guess. How do you find a thing, and where is the thing that you wish to find, and what else will you find when you're there? And now in this era of the web, that we live an unending rainfall of images. And I think that was Umberto Eco, I think, that said that. But at any rate, that might have been a quote. But the thing is that I find these images of these really rarefied or lovely mid-century toy packages, model kit boxes, toys, from all over the world. And these are not objects that are available to me, and they're not the kind of thing that anyone has really sought to do a really beautiful series of coffee table books about. Sure, there are some pieces out there, some out there that are mentioned, but the only way I have access to them is really through the internet. But I want them as studio materials, as images, because I really pore over them. And so what I'll do is it's as basic as I'll go to Google image search. I'll hit images. I'll go to my tools and I'll hit large, so I get a big enough image that I can print on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And I make my own books. I make my own coffee table books.
Interesting.
The images, and I never tire of looking through those. But I suppose that's not a very radical thing to say when, those of us that have our own music playlists. I don't tend to tire of my music playlist either, because I think I have the best taste of any human that's ever. My music is the best ever, and my images are the best too that I choose for me. And so those books are, if I get sort of a little bit stuck, or I think, well, in 1959, how did the illustrator show reflection on the windshield of a car? And then I'll look at those images, and there'll be boxes that were done by French manufacturers and English and Americans and Japanese. And those are, those are real illustrators, real people painting those paintings, right? And so you look at those toy boxes and you can see how they were trained to create the effect of window glass or the reflection off of a chrome. And it's just an endless source of fascination for me. And I can't go to an art museum and get that information.
Right, exactly. So you've kind of replicated Pinterest in 3-ring binders.
Absolutely. I use Pinterest a lot. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think Pinterest is way, way underrated. If you want to have a real thrill, do you know about Same Energy?
No.
Type in same dot energy
Okay.
for a image search engine that will blow your mind.
Okay.
Because what it's going to deliver are images that have the same energy, the same atmosphere
Oh my God.
as your key image.
So you have to highlight an image and then do that?
Well, you can do it. You can import an image. You can select an image and just that turns up and have more of the same. You can you can import an image into the engine.
Because Pinterest already does feed that to you, right?
No, but this is
more specific.
This is more specific. This is the feeling of the image.
Oh my goodness! Now you got my full attention. I'm intrigued what that's going to be about.
It gives you the same atmosphere, the same quality of style, but not the same style. And so it could be anything that's in the same energy as that image.
Oh, that's fascinating. Oh, I'm glad we're doing this interview. Look at me learn.
Yeah, well, so I like this idea of a 3-ring binder version of Pinterest boards.
Yeah,
and I'm the same way. I love looking through my collections.
Yeah,
because it's sort of I'm discovering what it is that I like.
Yeah, it's not entirely self-referential. I mean, it's because I'm looking at the creations of other persons. You know, I'm not looking at the things that I've created.
Right.
We don't even decorate with my artwork. It's all in boxes. I'm notorious for orphaning my own pieces. So as soon as they're done, all I can think about is what will I make next. And but so you know, there's a sense that I'm looking at all these images I collect or listening to the music that I listen to most of that's sort of self-referential, but it's not, because it's not just that, because I'm looking into the lives of others and their moment in the world, and I'm also looking at the type of imagery that I source, that commercial imagery. It was gone through so quickly and thrown out. It was never expected to be celebrated or analyzed, or it was strictly for. And then every now and then I'll stumble upon pure gold, where you've got this image where the artist that was tasked with creating this robot illustration, per se, or this other thing, they really weren't that talented. And I love those the most, where the images are just so, they tried so hard and couldn't do the thing. But it ended up going on the box anyway. Oh, I just cherish that stuff because it's so human. It's
kind of like folk art.
It's like folk. It's so, they tried so hard, but maybe they lived in a culture that had never seen this thing for another product. Say the toy was made in one culture for export to another culture. They weren't even given, in some likelihood, they weren't even given the thing that it was supposed to be. They were just told. And so you open the box and the toy is one thing and the illustration is this incredible, beautiful mutation of it. I just love that stuff because there's a human life in there somewhere.
I want to send you a little paperback book that I made called Rinette's Fishes. These were fishes that were painted in like 1700s, and they were color, and they were basically painted and colored by people who had never seen the fishes.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
And they're just beautiful in a way. They were like Indonesian fishes painted by people who hadn't been there. They were based off of descriptions.
Yeah. Oh, see,
and there's a certain naivete and a cleverness and a brilliance because they were half imaginary and half real.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I love that most because what I feel like I see. And it speaks a little bit to why I look very little at digitally constructed imagery. And part of the reason I look at the hand done stuff, particularly of an era before people had the web, was in all likelihood, a lot of these illustrators had little or nothing to work on, but they had a deadline and a need to make a living.
Right. They had two things. They had deadline and imagination.
They had a deadline and imagination and a desire not to get fired. You know?
That's art. There you go.
There you go. Right. Once people realize that, that's their MFA. You don't need to go spend any money.
Right.
Yeah, that's all. That you spent 2 years at MFA to realize you knew that all along.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, no, that's exactly it. And you see, and you start to. My imagination goes to, well, who is this human? And because there's a human in that thing, and somewhere in there, and
Yeah.
I'm doing my own illustrations now. I've started to paint. Last couple of years, I've sort of made myself paint my own illustrations instead of source vintage stuff and crop it up. It's something really satisfying for me about not being really, really good at the painting, because I try hard and I don't quite get it, and there's something I really like about that.
Well, there are so many other questions. I know that you have a whole workshop of tools we would love to hear, but we have only a few minutes. So tell us about either a recent project that you're working on or something that you want to share with our listeners that you've been involved in.
Well, one of the things that I think, because it would be more accessible to the listeners than me speaking about my next imaginative run through the hills, is and I mentioned it in our document, is the Raise the Toygantic film that Gail Lerner made in 2015, the LA-based writer-director. And Gail had seen my work a number of years ago, and when she was in Maine and when we were there, we crossed paths. At any rate, 2015, she made a 26-minute long short film based on a key piece of mine, a 8-foot-long toy ocean liner that I built, sunk it in a lake, and then a year later went back, brought it out of the lake, and presented it as if I'd found it and had uncovered the entire history of it as a line of large toy ships that sunk. Every kid that got them, they sunk. And so she made an entire film on that, short, long film, I say, because it's 26 minutes. I think she calls it a long short. But that was an incredible experience, because for me, what it did was I tend to leap from one piece to another, like someone jumping across a creek, jumping from stone to stone, not thinking that those stones have a relationship to each other. And the pieces that she used in that film, I never thought of them as being part of a narrative. They were each independent, sort of standalone things that pointed at this or that or the other conceptually. And when she made that film, in a way, she gave my work back to me more dimensional, more connected, and more meaningfully than I had ever imagined myself. And if you ever, as an artist or whatever writer, whatever creative person, if you ever have the good fortune to have someone put a great deal of their own time and money and other persons, because of the actors, into a body of work that uses your work and then hands it back to you enlarged, it's just one of the most I'm just so profoundly grateful. I just don't know what else to say. And it's not that there's anything masterpiece about any of it. It's just lovely, and it's funny, and it's astute, and it just opened my eyes to what I was doing. And I can get I'm very tunnel vision. I'm a very linear person when I'm working. I shut everything out in order to achieve the goal, right? To finish the thing. And in doing so, and living that way, a lot of the beauty that's to my left and my right and above and below, I miss it, because I'm not paying attention to what people are trying to say to me, which is, we like what you do too, and here's why. And so that film is probably the thing because the other reason I think I should bring it up is I didn't make the film. I mean, it's somebody else's work, and
right.
And she took my work and made something out of it that I hadn't even imagined, and that was really profound for me. That is a very profound gift from her. And
yeah, that's called Raise the Toygantic.
Yeah, or Toygantic. Nobody really knows how the piece is pronounced. That's sort of an inside joke, but the piece is at a museum. You can look it up. It's a really robust narrative. I put a lot of work into the narrative, and Gail used most of what I had done. She used, and then she wove a bunch of my other pieces into a story with it. It's delightful. It's 26 minutes that you won't mind not getting back. It's
okay. Well, thank you so much. I had not seen it, but it's now queued up, and I'm going to watch it as soon as we get off of this.
You'll recognize a lot of the actors. They're like Coen Brothers, people that Coen Brothers use and what have you. It's just charming. And I got to be on set. I'd never seen I'd never been on set. and I didn't realize how these improv people, how fascinating it is to watch improv actors run with an idea and create a thing from it. It was such a great experience to
The
watch.
professionals.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you again for these. I just love talking about art and the tools that make art and why we make art and how we can. So thank you for these great suggestions. We'd love to have you back again talking about more things in your workshop.
I'd love to. Yeah.
So thanks again.
Thank you for the gifts of the ideas and the words and all this. You've both been a gift to me, and I appreciate that immensely.
Oh, wow.
That's
high praise.
Well,
Thanks so much, Randy.
I'm high on my second COVID shot. So, I'm especially right with the world right now, and you guys,
excellent.
You guys are part of it. So thank you so much.
Hey everybody, it's your host Mark, and I wanted to thank you for listening to the Cool Tools Show, and I also wanted to let you know that we've got a lot more going on at Cool Tools than just this podcast. We also have the Cool Tools website, which has a new tool review every day, and you can get there by going to cool-tools.org. We also have 4 different newsletters that you can subscribe to, and you can subscribe to those from the Cool Tools page. We have this podcast that you're listening to right now. We also have a YouTube channel where we review tools. Check that YouTube channel out by going to youtube.com/cooltools. And one of the things I'd like to ask you is if you're really enjoying everything that we are producing, go to our Patreon page and support us there. You can sign up and give us as little as $1 a month, and that would mean a lot to us. The money that we get from Patreon goes towards a lot of things. We transcribe our podcast interviews so that you can read them online. We pay for editing of our podcasts and for our videos. We pay our contributors. We have video production costs. We have equipment costs. We have hosting costs. And the money you give us through Patreon also goes to support Cool Tools Lab. Anything you give is a huge help. And one of the things that we do is if you are a contributor to Patreon, we'll give you a shout out on air. And so I have a few people here to thank this week. Mark Lyanaj, Micah Gates, Monty Zukowski, Patrick James McNally, Robert Cohen, Scott, Spence Lloyd, Steve Avery, Steve Golden, Steve Levine, Tom Hess, William Phillips, Aaron Nipper, Darab Patel, Glenn Mercer, Jay Walker, Jeff Bonner, Ryan Jarrell, Pat Daly, Patrick Kennedy, Troy Wallet, Mike Camerate, Nicole Harkin, Tim Youssef, Scott Reed. Thanks all of you for supporting Cool Tools. And if you would like to have a shout out, go over to the Patreon page and sign up. And thanks for listening to the Cool Tools podcast. We'll see you next week.